If you can't visit your best friends right now, then why not play with Best Fiends, a fun, addictive, casual game anyone can play right away. Get this free download in the Apple App Store or Google Play today. Best Fiends, that's friends without the R, Fiends. 5 stars and 100 million downloads says a lot. Check it out, you're going to love it. Life presents the toughest challenges. Every day you are faced with decisions that test your ability to express who you really want to be in this world. We're told to keep saying affirmations and keep thinking positively, but what do you do when that stuff doesn't work? Welcome to the Overwhelmed Brain, where you'll learn to make decisions that are right for you so that you can create the life you want now. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Paul Coliani and I'm here to help you increase your emotional intelligence so that you can avoid dysfunction, handle toxic situations with grace and ease, and show up as your authentic self. Everything I talk about on this show is my personal opinion and is meant for informational and educational purposes only. Always consult a medical or psychological professional before making any changes that could affect your physical or mental health. And I think a good thing to start off with today is something that I was just talking about with a client just today, and it was through an exchange that we had shortly after our session where she is trying to make a big decision in her life. And the decision that she is making is life-changing. It's a big decision. It changes where she might live, who she might end up being with. And this big change all centers around, a past that has happened and a future that she isn't sure of. And so the past happened. She had a breakup. So she has this history that she could look at the future and think, well, is that history going to happen again? Is what happened in the past going to be what happens in the future? Her decision is muddled. It's hard to make for her because she's not sure what exactly will happen. And we all run into this. We all run into a decision that we need to make that we have no idea how it's going to work out. Some of us turn that into anxiety. Some of us, in fact, I have an email that I'm going to read to you a little later, but it's about a decision that we might make or situations that come up that turn into anxiety. But it's often because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, anxiety in itself is fear of an unknown future, and reacting to that, I mean, that's not the only thing that causes anxiety, but it's a common cause. And what do we do? Do we just stay anxious? Do we make the decision and move forward anyway? That's always been kind of my philosophy. You make the decision and then deal with the success or failure of that decision after you make it. But how do you reach that point where you can actually make the decision with any level of confidence? And maybe you won't have any level of confidence. Maybe you'll have no confidence and you make it anyway. So I'm just going to talk about that just for a few minutes. This person, my coaching client, is facing this big decision, like I said. And one of the things that she said really was highlighted for me. It stuck out to me. And that was that this situation that she's talking about is missing some of the primary components or values of what would make her happy. And this involves another person. So what would make both of them happy? And it does come down to what she values in any type of relationship. So what I mean by that is, if you look at any relationship in your life, you can probably list what you like about that relationship and what you don't like about that relationship. There are components. Maybe it's the way they behave. Maybe there's not, if it's a romantic relationship, not enough chemistry. Or maybe there's a lot of chemistry, but you differ in the movies you like. And it causes a problem because you want to go to the movies together. And on and on and on. You can really start to list everything that is compatible and everything that's not, and what you value. I like to call them values. What are your values in the relationship? All the things that you want in a relationship, all the things you appreciate in a relationship. And This can be for any relationship, but you can look at any of your relationships, like I was saying, and determine what is important to you about that relationship. So if it's with a family member, you can say, what's important to me is that I can share my most intimate things with this family member. And that's one of the reasons I love this relationship. It's one of the many reasons, if you have a family member you can do that with. And so that would be on your list of values for that relationship. I value this about my relationship with this person, or I value this about this relationship. And so when this person I'm talking about said that there would be trust missing in the relationship, what immediately came to mind was like the shape of a pyramid. Like if you put the word trust, which would be in my book, a high level value in relationships. Like I value trust over many, many other things in my relationships. If I can't have trust, then what do I have? Okay, well, I might have laughter. I might have companionship. I might have someone to bowl, go bowling with, or whatever, play frisbee with. But where's the trust? And if you don't have trust, can you fully be yourself? Can you show up as yourself? Can you express yourself fully? Can you be vulnerable around this person or any person if you don't have trust? So if trust isn't there, again, this is my opinion, my values in a relationship, trust is pretty much near the top, if not the very top thing. And so I have trust as a top level value. If I don't have that, then the rest of it can fall apart. And that's why I'm referring to like this pyramid shape. Like if you put trust at the top, if you have trust, then you have whatever else is building that pyramid. Confidence and security in your decisions, security in your foundation. Like if you make a decision, at least you can trust the other person to talk about it instead of fly off the handle because you're worried about their response to it. Because trust involves a lot of things. Trust is that top of that pyramid that has a whole lot of other components that build it up and put trust at the top. So that's how I look at it. In fact, let me pull up the email I sent to her because I wrote out the pyramid off the cuff and I want to see it, what I said. Here it is. So at the top of this pyramid, and I haven't really thought this through completely, but this is what I came up with really quickly, is that trust being the top of the pyramid. The next one down is trust allows you to have confidence and allows you to be more forgiving. It fosters or nurtures a supportive environment. It brings about kindness and lack of worrying. What's the opposite of worrying? More confidence and security, I guess. You're not overthinking too many things. You're not as sensitive to too many things. You're not jealous. There's no second guessing. And so I have this pyramid that at the top is the word trust, and the second level is confidence and forgiveness, and then support, kindness, and no worries, and like I said, everything else. And I don't know why it came to me, but that visualization came to me because at the top of the pyramid, whatever you have up there leads to what's below it. And I look at the top as one of your highest values. Now, the way you can kind of gauge how this works in your life is to ask yourself if your highest values in any relationship that you're in are being met. And the way I like to do it is I take the opposite of what trust is, for example. Let's just say that we're working with trust as a high-level value. The opposite might be distrust. And so the top of the pyramid, if you put distrust at the top, because it's a high-level value for you, and your relationship doesn't have that trust, actually has the opposite of that, or not enough trust, then your foundation, what your relationship is built upon, is the rest of the pyramid. And what does distrust contain? What components make up distrust? Well, I wrote down here fear, the inability to forgive, the inability to forget. It's difficult to support the other person or get support from them. The other person, or even you, if you have distrust, can be testy or angry. They can be worried. You can be worried. I mean, all these components that make up a relationship that has the top of the pyramid as distrust. I mean, there's overthinking, there's sensitivity, there's jealousy, there's second guessing. All of these components make up a relationship that has the foundation of distrust. So if you are in a relationship where you have a high level value that's being violated or isn't being met, then the rest of the components that make up the foundation of your relationship suffer. So when you have all these components that make up your relationship, I bet you can guess the quality of that relationship. I bet you can guess the level of happiness and satisfaction in that type of relationship. If the top of the pyramid is trust, if you can look at a person in your life and say, oh yeah, we have a lot of trust with each other. In fact, I trust them completely. I trust them with my life. The rest of the pyramid is going to be made up of components that are strong and bonding and complementary. And no matter what happens, you will have a solid foundation so that if and when you do fall, the components that create the foundation will be able to lift you back up. You'll feel more confident. You'll have less worry. You won't be second guessing. You'll feel the support. It'll all be there. This is why when I talk about values in a relationship, that it's so important to know what your highest level values are in a relationship. I sell a workbook called Stop Self-Sabotage at theoverwhelmedbrain.com. Not trying to sell this to you, but I'm just saying that if you need help going through your values, that workbook can help. But when I talk about this, I always like to just tell you how to do this. In a nutshell, it's very easy. You just list everything you value about a relationship. You know, you can make 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 items, all those components, everything that's important to you about a particular relationship in your life, friendship, family, romantic, whatever it is. Take your pick of the category and then list all the things that are important about it. Oh, I need to laugh. I need to have honesty. I need to have respect. I need to have trust. I need to have this and this and this and this. We need to have common, who knows, religious beliefs, political beliefs. That may be important to you as well. So you have all these values, and then you take the most important ones and you start putting them in a hierarchy. You ask yourself, okay, is honesty more important than laughing together all the time? Oh, that might be, because without honesty, can I laugh? Can I fully be myself? I'm going to have to move that up the list a little bit. Or, if I'm always laughing, is it okay if my partner or my friend or my family member doesn't respect me as much? That may or may not work for you. Some people it might. Some people say, I love to laugh. I don't care if they respect me or not. I hope that's not you, but some people might think that. Because if you don't care, then you don't care. That's no big deal. But whatever values that make up your relationship, that make you feel good about that relationship, that make you feel 100% you, authentic, genuine, and you feel like you can show up and be vulnerable and feel safe, that usually comprises of all the important components that will lead you to the top of the pyramid, which is the highest level values. So those highest level values are typically between 3 and 5 from what I've seen, from my history, from what I've learned. And so your top 3 or 5 values might start off with honesty, respect, trust, and maybe number 4 and 5 could be must laugh, must love dogs, things like that. And what you end up doing is looking at your list of values and asking yourself, are these being met in the relationship today? Which is what's leading me to her question about making this big decision. The person who wrote to me, she has to make this big decision, or she's thinking about making this big decision. And one of the things we talked about was trust. And I sent her this pyramid-looking thing that I just created and said, okay, let me ask you this. If you don't have trust today, what do you have? And what that is to me, and I'm using my own words, is distrust. And what is distrust made up of? And what will it lead to in the future? So this is one of those questions that answers what's going to happen in the future. Because if you are unsure what's going to happen in the future, all you have to do is look at what you have today and determine that the future will be that way. So what I'm saying here is that if you don't know the future, which you don't, unless you have some special skills, the only thing you have to work with is what you see in front of you right now, today. And if you see components that make up a different top of that pyramid than you want, then those components, they are carried into your future. Those components that make up this pyramid symbol that I'm thinking of will be in your future, meaning tomorrow will be the same as today, and next year will be the same as tomorrow. And what does this mean? Maybe it's obvious to you, but maybe some people aren't getting it. The point is, because you don't know the future, you will never be able to make a decision based on the future, which means you have to make a decision based on what you see today, and also based on the question which I asked her, let's just say it's about another person, if that other person never ever changes from who they are today, will you be okay with that? And also, will you be able to live with that, or be with that person, or want to stay connected to that person? If the answer is yes, I'll be okay with it, then what you have is the ability to answer the question, do I want to continue a relationship with this person? If your answer is yes, then no problem. Yeah, I can deal with that. What they're doing today, how they show up today, even if there's mistrust. If there's mistrust in a relationship and you decide that you don't want mistrust in your life, but you think that the trust will build, you're going off of, maybe fantastical information. You're making it up. You might tell me, yes, but I see improvements in the other person. I see what's happening. I see them healing. I see them going through changes. I see our relationship budding and blossoming, and it all seems to be going in a good direction. Well, the problem with that is you don't know what's going to happen. All you know is what you see today. And yes, you could see progress up until now. You could see that the trend line has kept rising and going to the right. You know, you're in that emotional board meeting and they pull out the whiteboard and they draw the line going to the right and up. Hey, look, we're profiting in our emotions here and our connection, and the relationship is going well. And as that line is drawn, it keeps going up. You can look at that and certainly make a decision based on that. I'm not saying that you can't or you shouldn't make a decision based on that. I think looking at trends is a great way to make decisions. Hey, it happened yesterday. It'll probably happen tomorrow. Great. You do have to be careful. You have to be careful about making decisions like that because you don't know tomorrow. I personally, and this is something I learned from my girlfriend when we first met, she told me the words, you are not your potential. You're not. You are not that person in the future. And that's so anti-motivational. That is my anti-motivational quote. You are not your potential. And what that means is who you think or who you know you're going to be, you are not that today. This kind of gives you a break, actually. It gives you a break because now you're not living up to your potential. So that doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means you're not there yet. Okay, give yourself a break. You're not there yet. Neither am I. So we are not our potential. We might have goals and aspirations. Great. We're always moving in that direction. That gives us meaning and purpose in our life. It's that beacon that we're following, and we're looking for that lighthouse on the shore. Following that, there's our potential, but we're not there yet. It gives us a break. It lets us be easy on ourselves. But it also, or I should say, and it also gives us the data we need to make a decision based on what we see in front of us today. And the coaching client that I'm working with sees that this other person does not have trust for her. The trust is missing. There might be some there, but the trust is missing. And so my challenge, for lack of a better term, to her is for her to ask herself, if that stays missing, if this is the way this other person's always going to be, then will you be okay with it? Because if the answer is no, then you'll decide based on that answer what you want for your future. Because you can't assume that someone's going to get better and heal and grow and move into a new space in themselves based on what you see today. You can look at the trend. If you've seen that upward climb, then you are certainly more prepared to make a decision to continue any type of relationship with that person or not. The trends can help. They can be a guide. But there are also other factors that her and I discussed, and I won't get into all of them right now. But my point is regarding when you don't meet the higher level values in a relationship, the rest of the relationship falls within the components that make up whatever is being met. So if trust is being met and that's one of your highest level values, then all the components that make up that higher level value also make up the relationship. The confidence, the forgiveness, the support, the kindness, the no worries, the no overthinking, the less sensitivity, the no jealousy, no second guessing. It all feels good. But if there's distrust in the relationship, using trust as the value for this example, it could be, honesty, respect. They have to make a lot of money. That could be a value as well. But we'll take one of the highest values and ask ourselves, is it being met? And then we ask, if it's not being met, then what is being met? What is the opposite of the value that isn't being met? The opposite in this case is distrust. And if you can't think of the opposite, just think of what value or non-value is being met, however you want to call it. And this non-value, kind of the opposite of the value that I was talking about, is distrust. And okay, when you are meeting distrust in the relationship, then your relationship is probably made up of the majority of these components of fear, lack of forgiveness, the inability to forget and move on, lack of support, anger and worry and overthinking and sensitivity and jealousy and second guessing. All of these components will probably be in that relationship. So bringing this about and wrapping this segment up, I want to make sure that I'm conveying that when you aren't meeting the top level values of a relationship and your relationship has all of these components that make up whatever you are meeting, the relationship will be based on those components and it will be your foundation. And whenever there's rough times, difficult times, it will be based on all these components that make that up. So that might be a convoluted way to say it, but I'm hoping I'm getting this across so that it makes sense. The point is, when you have this pyramid, whatever the relationship is built on trickles down into the rest of your relationship. The rest of your relationship is your pyramid. It's everything else that the relationship is made up of. So I could probably over-explain that to death and eventually confuse you. So hopefully you got it now, and I won't have to get into that anymore. But yes, wrapping this up, making a decision based on the future, it really helps to have knowledge, to understand your values, to take this data, all of your criteria that makes up a great relationship, and make sure that the way the relationship is today is the way you want it to be ongoing. Because if it isn't, this is where I may suggest that you follow what values you do want instead of hoping the values you don't want change. Because when they don't change, now you're stuck. I mean, you're not really stuck. You can choose to leave the relationship. But when you have a big decision and you're the type of person that commits to these decisions, like I am, we make these decisions and then we commit to them. And then we're like, oh crap, I made this decision that I have to continue with, and hopefully it'll change, and hopefully this other person will act nicer and show up in a different way. But then I hold on to hope, and that hope steers me wrong, because every time I want something to change, or every time I think it's going to change, I get my hopes up and then I'm let down. I'm not saying it always works out that way. Sometimes it works out great. Sometimes you take a chance and it works out great. that's when you have to decide that, you know what, I'm going to make the decision regardless of the consequences. I'll go through the lessons, and if I have to learn the hard way, I'll learn the hard way. And this is another way, to beat this old anxiety thing where if you really have to make the decision, if it has to go forward, then you just make a decision at the risk you'll be wrong. That's tough. It's very tough because your whole life could change. But that's why I'm emphasizing that it's important to know your values. And if you're not meeting those values and there's a chance they'll change, but you don't know, your best bet is to look at what you have today. Ask yourself the question, if it never ever changed, would I be okay with that? Because if the answer is no, then your decision should follow that answer. Hope this makes sense. We'll be right back after this. All right, a lot of us have had more time on our hands. Some of us aren't wanting it. Some of us don't want this extra time, but some of us do, and some of us have appreciated it. In fact, sometimes you need something to fill the time. I mentioned it at the beginning. It's called Best Fiends. It's a fun, casual game. I have it on my phone. I never talk about video games on this show, but there are times when a game comes along that I play that I actually enjoy killing time with. And when I can't sleep at night, if I don't want to read, I'm just going to play Best Fiends. I'm just going to play a game that allows me to just relax, be comfortable, and go with the flow. That's what it feels like when I play it. It helps me go with the flow because what you do is you drag your finger along this grid of different pictures and things. Like you might have 5 leaves in a row, and you drag your finger across, and it takes out the row, and then the row fills up with these new objects. And I'm enjoying it. It's a lot of fun, and so I want to share it with you. What's great about this is that it's a free download for your iPhone or your Android, and it's a unique, exciting puzzle experience, unlike any other puzzle game out there. And it's really cool that they update the game monthly, so it's not just one game and you play it until the end. They just keep updating the game so they have new levels and events, and it never gets old. Best Fiends actually treats the game like a service for their players. So I find myself playing it in the morning when I'm up before everyone else, and in the evening when I can't go to sleep. Sometimes that happens. But what a way to spend some time, especially like after a long work day when I've thought all day long. Just thinking and thinking and thinking, and I just need a break. This is a good break. It's fun. It's a continuous thing, and it never gets old. So I want you to check out Best Fiends. That's friends without the R, Fiends. You can get it in Google Play. You can get it in the Apple App Store. And they've already had 100 million downloads, and they have just tons and tons of 5-star reviews. And it is a must play. So download Best Fiends for free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's Best Friends without the R, Best Fiends. All right, I got a few emails I'd like to go over really quick and see if I can answer them in a timely manner here. The first one is from someone that said, I recently started listening to your podcast. I've also listened to some older episodes. It's really helpful and also enjoyable. Thanks for doing it. You're welcome. As someone who struggles with anxiety, I've noticed something about myself that I've not heard talked about on your podcast or others. I found one blog post where someone with anxiety discussed it, so maybe it isn't common. One of my issues is that I overreact and become upset when people change plans. Most recently, my boyfriend said he will come over in the afternoon, but then texted me saying it would be early evening and not the afternoon. And I thought we had a plan, but he didn't think we had agreed on a time. It was a simple misunderstanding, and we also handle plans and time very differently. But I felt angry and upset, and I spiraled down into a funk, and I could barely pull myself out of it. I've been doing better since realizing this happens, but I think it's linked to anxiety. Like a lot of anxious people, I try to control my outside circumstances in order to control anxiety, which never works. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the podcast. All right, you're welcome. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right, your last sentence there. When you try to control your outside circumstances in order to control anxiety, you say it never works. You're right. So if you want to be 100% confident in something, be confident that when you try to control your outside environment or the people in it, you will probably become anxious. You will probably drive yourself crazy because it's not possible. But, some of us have these control issues. We need to control. We want to know that if our world falls apart, that we have control, or we try to prevent our world from falling apart. So let me address your question. I'm going to go through these in kind of a fast way, not too detailed, because I've talked about this stuff before, but it's always good to readdress these and remind ourselves what could work in similar situations that we're in. You said, one of my issues is that I overreact and become upset when people change plans. And one of the things you said about this is you said you guys have a different idea about time. You handle and plan time differently. So that's good to know. I mean, knowing it is helpful. It's half the battle. But he said he's going to come over in the afternoon, but then texted it would probably be or would be early that evening. So my first question to you, if you were in front of me, is did you agree on a specific time? Because if you didn't, then where is the fault? I'm not saying it's with you or with him. I'm just saying the fault lies in not having a data point to go by. What I mean by that is if he said, you know what, I'll be there around 2, and you said, oh, around 2, that's great. Then if he shows up at 2:30 or even 3:30, it could be construed as, well, that's around 2. It was between 1 and 4. The cable company tells me that. I'm going to be there around 2, and they show up at 4. You're like, I'm just glad they showed up. But that's the point. It's like if you don't have that specific time, then you have to expect a non-specific response. So my point to you is when you are planning ahead, and plans change, absolutely. You do have to kind of get to that point where okay, plans are going to change. And we're going to talk about it in a second because you might have something deeper going on, or you probably do have something deeper going on here. But plans always change. I mean, that's going to be life. Plans change. But to help you, knowing that you guys handle time differently, by you asking specifically, what time do you think that will be? It will be very helpful. Now, you may already be doing this. I don't have enough information, but let's just say that you asked, what time do you plan on being here? And he says, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4. Now your brain's already starting to hit that anxiety loop because you don't have enough information. You're starting to lose control. This is where it comes in, is that you don't have enough information. You don't know the future. Now you have an uncertain future. So here's my advice, is that because you know yourself so well, A, try to pin down a time. Try it. But B, follow up yourself with him saying, hey, you know what? 2 o'clock is coming around. Do you still think you'll make it by 2? So this is you addressing any fears or concerns that are coming up in you before they just land on your lap. What I mean by that is if you think he's going to be there by 2, using this example, then 1:30 comes around and you just go, you know what, I'll just have faith that he'll show up. But now you're going to be worried for the next half hour, knowing that you are sensitive to the changes. I think it's important for you to do your due diligence and be aware of your emotional and anxiety state, where you do the follow-up and say, you said you'd be here by 2. I mean, do it nicely. You said you'd be here by 2. Is that still the plan? Don't just say, are you still going to be here by 2? You said you would be, because that is kind of aggressive and forward. But you do want to ask, is the plan still for 2? Because I'm making sure that I'm ready for you and I'm doing things that will be ready by 2, making lunch or whatever it is. And that way you'll have the information. Because when you don't know something for sure and that bothers you, then do some due diligence. Take some steps where you actually find out if the plan is still on. So that's why it's important to try to nail down the time. And when he or anyone that you're dealing with says, I'm not sure what time it will be, then my suggestion is to say, okay, will it be around 4? Will it be around 6? And if they say, well, probably closer to 4:30, then in your mind, don't set the limit at 4:30. In fact, set it an hour or two later. Oh, that means he'll be here at 5:30 or 6:30. I know it's hard to live life like that, but if you know that you're going to have a negative reaction when someone changes plans, then I would set yourself up for worst case scenarios. That's where I go with this. Is like, if I overreact all the time and it just turns out to be a couple hours that I'm overreacting by, maybe I need to tell myself that, no, that's not the time. It's going to be a couple hours later. And then when they show up early, it'll be great. But I know what you're saying, but am I supposed to have lunch ready at 2? Am I supposed to go to the concert at 2 knowing he'll be there at 4 even though the concert starts at 2:30? I get it, and there's probably not much you can do about that if this person is always late or sometimes late and sometimes early. There's nothing you can do about that, but you can convey the following. It's important to me for my own sanity to be as close to the plan as possible, because when it's not, I feel anxiety. So you can ask him or anyone that you're dealing with or working with to be as close to the plan as possible and to give you a heads up way ahead of time if they know differently. This doesn't mean you have to live your whole life like that, but there is something that you have to do for yourself, that due diligence I was talking about, and follow up and make sure that the other person's going to be on time. And if they're not, then what happens is you get to still have some control in this. Instead of just waiting to see if it happens, you plan ahead. Oh, I wonder if this is still going to happen. You might become a bug in someone's ear if you do this a lot, but what's going to end up happening is that you will be able to start feeling better inside yourself more often than not. It's true you may have a control issue. It's true that you want to control the environment and people in it, but there is a level of acceptance that you definitely need to come to, which is, I will never be able to control that, and I will always deal with a change in plans. It'll always happen. That's why I like to look at, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Just like if I'm late for something because my girlfriend is still getting dressed or taking a shower, then that hopefully I pre-planned in the worst case way that if we're late, then okay, what's going to happen if we're late? You know, my drill down process of what's worse than that? What's worse than that? If we're late, then maybe people will be angry. Okay, what's worse than that? Well, if they're angry, they might kick us out and they don't want us back. Okay, what's worse than that? Well, if we're not coming back, then they're not our friends anymore. Okay, what's worse than that? You just keep putting yourself through that until you realize the worst thing that could possibly happen. And it'll always lead to something probably ridiculous that would never happen. But going through that process allows you to get more comfortable with all the other minor stuff that could happen. Oh, if we're late, somebody might say something, or somebody may say nothing at all. Our mind tends to go to the negative, but when we work in the positive as well, then we have a better outlook and a better perspective, and we reframe the entire scene to something different. But it's better to go through the worst case scenario drill down process first. What's worse than that? What's worse than that? What's worse than that? Until you get to the point where it's so bad that it's ridiculous. And now you come back to now and you realize, oh, if the plan changes, it isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So that's a process. It's practice. And like I said, when I started talking about this, is that there's probably something deeper there, of course. I would highly recommend you ask yourself, when did this start? When did me having a fear of a change of plans or getting angry about someone changing plans, when did that start? Who did that start with? Why is this a belief? When did this belief just become important to me? Was it when you were 16? Was it when you were 10? Was it when you were 6? When did it start? Because if you can figure out the origin of why you get angry or when you started getting angry about this, you might be able to resolve this in yourself. You might be able to go, oh, when my father did this or my mother did that, or my father yelled at my mom or this and this and this. You might be able to put pieces together and realize that you created a false belief. You created a belief that it's bad or wrong to change plans. Maybe your mom and dad picked one college and you went to another and they never let it down. This probably started somewhere way back when. So ask yourself, when did this start? How old was I? What was going on at that time? What caused me to create this belief? And I'm telling you, you created this because you weren't born thinking, I hate when people change plans. You weren't born thinking that. You might have had a proclivity to it because if you weren't fed on time, you might have cried. But I doubt that the belief started then. I think what happens is that a specific event happens in your life, and then we take that belief with us everywhere we go, and we think that's how the world is supposed to be, and then we develop all these control issues. So that's what I got for you. Thank you so much for writing. I'm going to go into the next email here, and this person says, these are quick, I'm listening to your podcast periodically and really enjoy it. You have a very calming, now I have to read it calmly. You have a very calming, measured approach to things that I really appreciate. I'm listening to your episode on April 19th, 2020 on when you desperately want an explanation or closure, and I really appreciate the broad lens of expectation about having a right to know. Okay, so yes, if you haven't heard that episode, it is called When You Desperately Want an Explanation or Closure. I don't know if that's the whole title. Is that the whole title? Let me see. When you desperately want an explanation or closure, but you can't get it. So that's the whole title. So what he's talking about is in that episode, I said, you don't always have a right to know someone's reason for doing something. And what that means is somebody may do something that upsets you in some way, and you may think, I have a right to know why you did that. And my answer was a little controversial. It was, in my mind, I think it's controversial to say, no, you don't necessarily have a right to know certain things. Like if someone betrays you, it may feel like you have a right to know. That's what it feels like. But is it actual? Is it true? Somebody might say, well, the marriage contract says that I have a right to know if you cheated on me. Okay, you can use that excuse, but what if somebody never tells you why they cheated? What if somebody never shares with you why they betrayed you? What are you going to do? Hold on to it for the rest of your life? What if they choose to never, ever say a word? And now you are carrying around this unfinished business that you can't reach closure in your mind, and it's going to eat away at you for the rest of your life because you're going to ask the question, why did they do that to me? What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? What could I have done better? Listen to that episode for the full theory on that. But what I was saying back then is that sometimes we carry around these obsessive thoughts that we think we have a right to know something, so we keep it as an open loop in our mind, and it keeps looping. That tape keeps playing over and over and over again, looping in our mind. Why did he do that? Why did she do that? Why do I deserve this? And it's all these why questions or what could I have done differently questions. And when we do that, it's what I called, and you'll have to listen to the whole episode. Don't take this out of context. In the episode, I talk about it could be a slight narcissistic tendency to continue focusing on what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, the belief that you have a right to know, me, all this stuff that I want to know, I need to know, I this, I that. There could be a narcissistic tendency. It's not narcissism. I'm not trying to diagnose here. I'm just saying that it's important for you to know that if you're so focused on everything about you, instead of looking at someone else saying, well, everyone else has a right to change their mind at any time for any reason. When you just focus it on you and you want to know and you have to know, that it can shake your world a little bit. It can rock the boat, more or less, to say, you know what, maybe I'm just being a tad narcissistic here. Again, I'm not calling you a narcissist. I'm saying listen to that episode for the full explanation. Please don't take that out of context. If you're just tuning in for the first time and you hear me saying this, you're going to be like, that guy's insane. He thinks that people are narcissists because they're thinking about themselves or they want to know why someone betrayed them. Again, listen to that episode. I get into it more. But I'm going to read you the rest of this email. He says he really appreciates the broad lens of expectation about having a right to know. So he says, my ex-wife betrayed me with an affair and essentially has barely admitted it, but never apologized or spoken of it. It's been the most challenging issue emotionally and mentally, just due to anger, etc. I'm trying to rationalize that in cases when you are directly impacted or hurt like this, do you still not have a right? Is it really my narcissistic tendency driving an unfair expectation on my part? Thanks for your work. I'd also be interested in coaching as well. Okay, thank you so much for writing, and thank you for sharing that. And it's a great question. So your question is, you're trying to rationalize in cases that when you're directly impacted. So something happened directly to you. It affects your life directly. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Your life was intertwined with this other person's life, and now this other person did something that affects you completely and wholly, and it's going to change your life. And you asked, do you still not have a right? So I think it's important that we be careful how we use the word right. Do I have a right to know? I think you deserve to know. I think you should know. I think it should be shared with you why she did what she did. I think it would be healing for you to know. But the word I have objection with is having a right to know. Having a right to know means that you are going to force someone to tell you something that they don't want to share with you. And to me, that's not right. I don't like that feeling. If I wanted to do something and I had my own reasons and the other person felt betrayed, but I had my own reasons and it felt right to me to do it, but it hurt someone I loved, and then they came and said, I have a right to know, you better tell me. If they truly had a right and I was forced to tell them, then what about me? What about my, quote, rights? What about my feelings about it? What about my thoughts on the matter? But that person might say, yeah, but you did this to me. You hurt me. I have a right to know why you hurt me. Again, she may deserve to know. I should tell her. But it is also my right not to. As much as that sucks, it does, as much as it hurts, it's still my right to not tell. Again, this is out of context. You got to listen to the other episode, but I'm not talking about things that are so directly impacting you, like you're fighting for custody. You have a right to know where your kids are. You have a right to know certain things like that you have direct obligations and responsibilities for. You have a right to know that your intellectual property was stolen. There's some rights. I know I'm getting into the legal aspect of the word right, but I'm talking about emotional things that people go through that, yes, you may have a marriage contract that gets broken. You may have something legal, for example, but it does still come down to the emotional state and the emotional aspect of all this, which is if someone doesn't want to tell you, they do not have to tell you the reason they did something to hurt you. It is the worst feeling in the world because you feel like you want to know. I gave the example, my girlfriend broke up with me and she didn't give me the reason. All she said is, it's time. That was the most unfinished thought I've ever had. It's like, it's time. It's time for what? It's not time for bingo. It's not time to celebrate. That's for sure. It's time. And to me, it's over. But why? I want to know why. And of course, I'm going to have the thought, I have a right to know. You're affecting my life. My whole life is now challenged. It's, it's probably the wrong word, but it is affected. I went into a depression. That was what happened in that example. I got depressed. I have a right to know, damn it. And for me to shake myself out of that funk that he's talking about, getting himself out of that is going to involve an acceptance that he may never, ever know the reason. That is the hardest part. So his question is actually, is it really my narcissistic tendency driving an unfair expectation on my part? It's not an unfair expectation. It's not. It is a very, very fair expectation to be told why somebody did something to you or did something to hurt you. They may not have wanted to hurt you. Maybe their intention wasn't to hurt you, but to please themselves or to do something that was selfish. That's a terrible way to look at it because it still hurts. Why were they only thinking of themselves? I agree. You deserve to know. But when you cannot get it out of your head, when you are thinking about it constantly, you become obsessed with it, and you have to know the answer, it does, in my opinion, fall into, hey, you're having a narcissistic tendency to make it all about you and expect the other person to show up in a way that it sounds like they never will. So you can either hold on to this, or my perspective, I'm going to shake up your foundation a little bit and saying, hey, you're being narcissistic. That's not what I really mean, but in a way, the tendency to continuously think about yourself and make it all about you helps to shake your foundation. Doesn't mean it's true. Doesn't mean you're a narcissist. It doesn't even mean you have a narcissistic tendency. It's just a matter of shaking your world a little bit, pushing you off balance a little bit, perhaps giving you the pattern interrupt that helps stop the obsessive thinking. Because when you're thinking about something all the time, why did she do this? How could they do that to me? What could I have done differently? What should I have done then? All of those thoughts can melt your brain. You're just stuck in this continuous cycle of thought. Definitely listen to my episodes on obsessions because you're going to find that will be very helpful for those kind of thoughts. But to answer your question directly, is it really your narcissistic tendency driving an unfair expectation on your part? Let's put it this way. If I said yes, would it help? Or if I said no, would it help? Because the idea isn't that I'm right or wrong. The idea is that it's a consideration in your mind that if it helps you stop obsessing, then that is the right answer for you. So it might be a little bit counter to what I'm talking about last time, but my intention, the whole point of that episode, was to rock your world a little bit, get you off of the obsessive thoughts about I should know, because the observation of you thinking about yourself all the time can actually break the pattern of you thinking about yourself all the time. This may not be the best answer. It may not be the perfect thing you need to hear, but I'm trying to answer your question in a way that you asked it and hope that everything I talked about in that episode and in this episode, and of course my episodes on obsession, will be helpful to you so that you have some guidance on how to get out of this thought process. I get it. I mean, if someone betrayed me, it would, I think about my girlfriend. If she betrayed me, what happened? I mean, there was all this trust. We talk about that pyramid. All the components of our relationship was built on trust, and it trickled down from trust, and everything that made up our relationship, I had trust in. It was something I could feel safe in. And then suddenly there's a betrayal. What does it do to all those components? It destroys them. It makes us feel so hurt and alone, and we don't know what to do because our entire pyramid has crumbled. It's gone. And we just need a reason this happened so we can start to put the pieces back together. At least that's what we go through. What was the reason? Why would that person do this to me? I need closure. I need to know why they did it so I can start putting the pieces back together. And that's what gets us. We get stuck in wanting to know the reason. We have a right to know. And we get stuck in that obsessive thought continues over and over, permeating our mind. And when that happens, we're unable to lift ourselves up and start the new foundation of the pyramid that makes us us. whether we're relating to someone or not, because there is the foundation of us. And when we relate to other people, we include them as part of us. They are part of our identity. And we refer to ourselves as we and us. So we build this pyramid together. But when that person does something that really hurts us and that pyramid falls apart, now we have to put it back together ourselves. But it's so hard to put it back together when we're stuck on that thought of why or how. How could this happen? Why did this happen? Why did they do that to me? That's why I talked about the narcissistic tendency. And it doesn't matter if it's a true narcissistic tendency or if it's just a word that knocks you off your balance so that you can stop thinking in circles and start rebuilding your pyramid again. A lot of metaphors in this episode, but I hope that helps. When we come back, I'm going to say some thank yous and some goodbyes, and I'll read you this final email, and we'll see if we can tackle that last one during the outro of the show. Thank you so much for those who have written in, and I definitely believe that when someone wrongs you, when they hurt you, that you deserve to know why. You deserve to know the reasons so that you have some closure. It may be the worst feeling in the world when you know the reasons, but at least you'd be able to move forward without constantly thinking about it. So you absolutely deserve to know. You absolutely deserve healing. But if you can't get it out of your head, if it's nonstop, then it could be helpful if you just think, God, I can't stop thinking about myself all the time. Am I a narcissist? And again, it's not serious. It's just a way to rock the boat a little bit and rattle your brain into some sort of different perspective. Hope this helps. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll be right back after this. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. I want to remind you to head over to Google Play or the Apple App Store and download the game Best Fiends, Fiends, and enjoy the best kind of addiction, the good kind of addiction, where you can play in quick spurts or have a marathon session, totally up to you. Best Fiends. Check it out today. And I want to thank Leela for her donation. Thank you, Leela. You reached out and said, you know what? I'm going to donate to The Overwhelmed Brain. She went to theoverwhelmedbrain.com and she actually found the donate button. I don't think I highlight that, but it's in there. Thank you, Leela. I appreciate your generous donation. That helps the show continue to go, and I see that as a thank you to me, and I thank you for that. And I want to thank Jacob. Jacob decided to subscribe to the Patron site over at patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com. Jacob, you are so generous, and I appreciate you. I value you, and I can see that you value what we do over here as well. And I have no words. I am just so grateful and humbled by your contribution, Jacob. And of course, Nikki is so generous. She joined the Patron program as well. And all three of you, Jacob, Nikki, and Leela, I appreciate you so much. And, I talked about values today. That is value. Those are people who value the show and decided to support the show because they could. Doesn't mean I want to make everyone else feel bad for not doing this. Some people can afford it. Some people can do it. And some people can't. And I value everyone that listens to this show. And if you can't support through patronage or donation, then certainly share the show. Tell other people about it, because the more people that listen to the show and the more popular it gets, the more support we get. So that's how this works. And I appreciate everyone that listens to the show. And I'm going to thank a patron member that has been in the patron program for a while. And today's patron of the week is Crystal. So Crystal, I get your support every month. I appreciate you. There are others out there that I'll be naming off as the weeks go by. And I promise I'll keep it shorter next time. There were just an abundance of people supporting recently. And I just wanted to let you know I'm grateful. It keeps us going. And it makes me feel good knowing that even during these tough times with the pandemic, that you are contributing to this show. So I appreciate you. And I thank everyone in the Patron program who continues to give and listen for your name in upcoming episodes. If you want to donate or join the Patron program that has all kinds of private episodes and workbooks and discounts on my products and services, head over to patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com. And finally, I'd like to thank Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com for some of the music transitions in The Overwhelmed Brain. And like I said, I'm going to read you one more email. I'm trying to go through these. I'm trying to do these lightning round emails here because I get a bunch of them and I'm trying to keep up. This person wrote back to me when I wrote back to her and said, how are things going? She had some issues with her relationship. And she had a lot of great things to say about what has happened. Everything is now on a good path. And she said that he's showing up differently and he's working on himself. And she's getting better and she's working in herself. And he's supportive of her and tries to help her through it. So a lot of changes have happened in their relationship. I won't get into all the details, but she said there's a lot of positives and there's a lot of ups and downs, but it's been great. She did ask, I need some suggestions for building my self-esteem. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to reach out. You're welcome. And yes, that's a great question. How do you build your self-esteem? Well, I talked about that in another episode. Look up self-esteem. Go to theoverwhelmedbrain.com. You'll find it. It's going to be self-worth, self-esteem, and avoiding the ego trap. I think that's what the episode is called. That's a great episode. So if you want to work on building your self-esteem, that's a great episode to start with. My go-to when it comes to working on self-esteem is figuring out where I lack esteem, confidence in myself, surety in myself. I like to call it surety of self. If I have surety of self, then I have confidence. Then my ego is healthy. I feel good about myself. I have a good outlook of myself, a good perspective of myself, I should say, and a good viewpoint of my life and where it's going. I have all these positive things, even when I'm running into challenges like, oh God, I'm going to be broke tomorrow. That's the worst thing ever. But the self-esteem isn't affected. It's just maybe my perspective in that moment about my future is affected if that happens. And I mean, when that happens, it's rare, but it does happen. Happens to the best of us, is that we could be confident and sure of ourselves, and then suddenly a challenge happens, and now we're not sure if we're going to make it. We're not sure if we're going to make it the next day or the next week. So things can take a hit, but self-esteem is one of those foundational beliefs or thoughts and feelings about yourself that you take with you every day into life. It is part of your foundational makeup. And I look at self-esteem as an evolution of self-worth. Self-worth is what you start to develop when you're a child. Self-worth is developed when, for example, you are writing all over the walls with your crayons, and you think you have this masterpiece. And then mommy or daddy or caretaker walks in and says, "What the hell? What are you doing to these walls?" And suddenly you feel tiny. Suddenly you feel scared. Suddenly you feel like, oh crap, I just got in trouble and I have no idea what I did. And what you go through in that moment, if it isn't addressed later, let's just say that you took in that moment that being creative was a terrible thing and you should never do it. So you hide that creativity, you lock it away and try not to access it too much. This is a minor example, but it can really have an effect on your self-esteem. It can really have an effect on your self-worth. You could be sitting there doing what you love and you feel good, and when your parent or caretaker comes in, you say, "Look what I did." And they give you the most disapproving look, or they yell at you, or they just do something that makes you feel terrible. Suddenly your self-worth drains. This is just one example, but this is what can happen, is that something will happen when you're a child and your self-worth drains. If that's not replenished, when your self-worth turns into your self-esteem, guess what doesn't carry over? Whatever is unreplenished doesn't carry over. Or I should say, the level of self-worth that you have becomes the level of self-esteem that you have. And so the reason I'm telling you this is in order to up that self-esteem or improve it or increase it, I like to look at, in my past, what were times that I felt less than worthy? What were times that I was treated less than worthy? Even if I make up the excuse of, well, they didn't know any better. We do that to ourselves. We think, but he or she didn't know any better, so it's really not their fault, so I'll just take on the brunt of my dysfunction or my toxic behavior or my limited belief about myself. I'll just take on the brunt of that and put no blame on anyone else because I'm a martyr. I'm being totally sarcastic here, but I'm making a point. When we take it on and we say, well, it's not their fault. They didn't know any better. I'm just going to have to deal with this myself. Then we lose the opportunity to release what we might be holding on to, because then we feel so alone and isolated and unsupported. We have nowhere to turn because we have no one to, quote, blame, so that we can somehow get out of this locked in feeling that I'm terrible or I'm not important or I'm not lovable or I'm not significant. Instead of utilizing a thought process such as, you know what, they didn't treat me right. They neglected me. They should have done better. Instead of utilizing that as a way to free yourself from low self-esteem and low self-worth, we sometimes can hold it in. So, for example, I might look at my stepfather, who showed up as an alcoholic, aggressive, violent, sometimes man in my life, my entire life, or at least my entire childhood and teenage years. He showed up in a way that frightened me, that made me think I wasn't good enough, made me think a lot of things about myself. And when I got older and I had a breakdown and I had to go to therapy and I had depression, all this stuff was interrelated. But if I had hung on to the idea that he just didn't know any better, he was sick, he was an alcoholic, so how could I blame him? If I had held on to that, I think it would have been almost impossible for me to heal. Now, this is just me. I'm not saying that it has to go this way for you. But for me, I look at my past and I look at how I healed through a lot of this stuff, through almost all the stuff that I went through. And the one thing that changed the speed of my healing was allowing myself to hate him. And that's not a popular path, because I was brought up that it was not okay to hate. I believe that you should never hate people. So I kept myself in this little bubble and locked myself in this low self-esteem box that I couldn't get out of because I felt it was not okay to hate. And when we do this to ourselves, oh, it's not okay to blame that person. Oh, it's not okay to make them responsible, no matter how nice they are and how much they don't deserve it. I'm not actually saying to go to that person and say, you're a bad person. I'm saying to do this in your mind, allowing yourself to do it in your own mind or even express it to someone safe, allowing yourself to open up whatever is locked in there that you hadn't allowed yourself to think or feel, and let yourself feel it. Let yourself think it. It's okay to unlock that box and go, you know what? There's hate in there. Whoa, there's hate? I shouldn't hate. But let yourself, I don't mean to direct this at you, but I'm thinking in my own mind, I'm going to let myself hate. But I shouldn't. But I haven't all this time. And the day I chose to let myself hate him for the way he treated me and the way he treated my mom and the rest of my family was one of the most important pivotal days of my life, because I finally allowed what I was repressing that whole time out. I let it out. You know what that does for your self-worth and your self-esteem? It reveals it. It allows it to flourish. You can actually start feeling a little bit more free to be you, instead of feeling so restricted and conflicted and resistant and having all these negative obstacles in your way to feeling better, all because you wouldn't allow yourself to think about someone in a certain way or feel something about someone in a certain way because you're not that type of person. I'm too nice, or I don't want to think that way. I'm compassionate. I'm a kind person. I don't want to think bad things about people. Well, sometimes you have to. There's my putting my foot down. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to think, I hate that person. If it helps you, if this is part of the release that you need. This may not apply to everyone. This may not apply to you. Maybe there's a different feeling in there. Maybe there's something else that you locked away. Maybe you've got nothing locked away. I'm talking about this person who wrote to me, how do I work on my self-esteem? The way I turned it around was allowing myself to think and feel things that I wouldn't allow before. all because I thought I was not supposed to think or feel that way. And when we impose these restrictions on ourselves, we restrict ourselves from feeling good sometimes. And so we want to take out these restrictions. We want to be free to be yourself, be free to express. Again, I'm not saying you go to the perpetrator of whatever crime that this person committed in your life. You do it in your mind. You do it with someone safe. You do it with your best friend. You do it with someone that you feel won't be judgmental or put you down for it. And if you can't find that person, well, that's why therapy is important sometimes, because you can find a person like that in therapy, but you can also do it in your own mind. You know what? Screw it. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. Just say it if that's what comes up for you. For me, that's what came up for me. And it came out in a lot of tears. I'm very much downplaying what happened. I fell on my knees. I was screaming. I was crying. I hate him so much. It all came out. It was the beginning of my healing, or at least one of the major pivotal moments of my healing when that came out, because I didn't know it was in there. And when I found out it was in there, I was shocked because I didn't realize I was holding on to hate all that time. And so what I'm saying to you, the person who wrote, is that sometimes people in our lives who may have had good intentions, who may be good people, have done things in a way that lowered our self-worth. And when you are able to identify those moments and figure out, okay, what did that person do or say that may have lowered my self-worth? What did they do or say? And then to have free thoughts, F-R-E-E, free thoughts that allow you to think anything you want, any way you want, because that is the child that never got to express what happened. And what I mean by that is sometimes, or a lot of the times when we're children, we just hold it in. We stuff it down. And it can turn into dysfunction and toxic behavior. And then we take these stuffed down, repressed emotions and thoughts into our adult world and into our adult relationships. And what will happen is our adult relationships will reflect what we're holding on to, what we're carrying with us. And sometimes we'll have a string of bad relationships, or we'll have a string of failures and other things that we do. And that's when we have to step back and think, okay, something has to change here. Something is going on in my life that I need to change. So maybe it's time that I look at that so that I can change things and make things better in my life. And this is one way to do it. Allowing that expression to come up and out of you so that you can get into a better emotional space and feel better about yourself. It's all about freeing the obstacles that are keeping you from enjoying life, being happy, and being comfortable in your own skin. So that's one thing you could try to work on your self-esteem, is to start to find something in there that might be locked away that you need to free. And it may be a thought process or an emotional state that you think you shouldn't feel, but maybe you do. Maybe that one time your mommy or your daddy spanked you, it really left a mark on you. Hopefully it really didn't, but it left an emotional mark on you. But you didn't see that as a problem because you thought you deserved the spanking or whatever. And the child that repressed whatever pain or emotion that was going on back then kept it and then brought it today. And what you really want to say today is, damn you, Mom, why did you do that to me? And maybe that's what's needed to free you, is to actually allow yourself to have a thought that maybe you would never say to the person, because you don't really feel that way about that person today. But if it's trapped in there, it might be time to release it. And that could be one way to do it. Thank you so much for writing. Thanks for joining me for another episode. I want to remind you, keep an open mind, because you never know when this stuff is going to come up and it might need releasing. And if you find any dysfunctions showing up in your life or in your relationships, then maybe there's something in there that hasn't been expressed yet. So that's why I always say to keep an open mind, because it allows you to step into your power. And this will help you be firm in your decisions and actions so that you can create the life you want. You can find the healing that you want. All because you do one little change. That one little change could lead to huge steps to your growth and evolution. You are powerful beyond measure. And I want you to remember that. And above all, and this is something I absolutely know to be true about you, without a doubt, you are amazing.